This lecture is on Chalkis. It's in Attica, about an hour and a half northeast of Athens. It's a Romaniot community also. It was also it's a long-lived but very small Jewish community. It's the capital of the island or peninsula today of Evia, and one of the large islands, Evia, Cyprus, and Crete, according to the prophet Joshua, and one of the most distinguished, according to Philon of Alexandria. The Romaniot Jewish community of Chalkis may not be the oldest one in Greece, but it is the only one in Europe that has been living in the same city for maybe 2,500 years without interruption. It is active in the city's life and has therefore naturally written a history of its own. It is said that the name of the city derives from the Semitic root chalek, which means to split up. It also means gravel or a piece of land. The Jewish presence in Evia, and especially Chalkis, goes far back, and it's assumed that the Jews arrived after 586. It was possibly the pirates who followed the Phoenicians as merchants when the latter came to Greece and passed by Evia on their way to Thebes. During the Hellenistic period, the Jews were undoubtedly settling there and organized communities mainly in Chalkis. Travelers also testified on the Jewish presence in a Jewish community in Chalkis during the Byzantine period and during the Venetian domination, 1205 to 1470, when the city was called Negroponte, and during the Ottoman occupation, 1470 to 1833. Here you have a picture of Chalkis many years ago, probably in the 19th century, during after Greek independence sometime. Here's a more modern picture of the bay of in Chalkis. In 1159, the Spanish traveler Rabbi Benjamin of Metudela visited the city and wrote in his itinerary that 200 Jews, some say 200 families, lived in Chalkis. He discovered there was no anti-Semitism in Kis, and the Jews had always lived within the fortress. They spoke only Greek, and it is hard to distinguish them from the other inhabitants. They even had an organized settlement of their own with a synagogue in the middle. He met with three rabbis, Rabbi Eliyahu Valteri, Rabbi Ar, or maybe Raphael Emmanuel, and Rabbi Kalev, head of the settlement. While the Venetians and Lombardians inhabited Chalkis, at the time, the Jewish community of the city Negroponte flourished, and its members were involved in business, wine export, also artisans, dyers, and silk manufacturers. Also, in the Evia Peninsula, the blue from the talit has been found, even in recent times. It's possible to find the blue dye. Unfortunately, however, by the end of the Venetian domination, wars, famine, and heavy taxation had impoverished the community. Jews were still involved in trade but had no civil rights, did not participate in the administration, and were forced to act as executioners. The Turks had the same policy for them. In 1470, the fortress was seized by Muhammad the Conqueror. A terrible massacre followed. The Janissaries, those are the Sultan's elite troops, helped people escape in exchange for gold, and many Jews fled to Thebes that had a very large Jewish community. As of that time, Chalkis, including the Jewish community, went through a period of decline, hard exploitation, brutality, and terror, in addition to being inflicted by a merciless plague. In the 1821 revolution, and the idea of the revolution, the city matured in Evia. The Jews followed the fate of all the other residents of the city. Phoussaris and Philippopoulos mentioned that two Jewish families, the Cohens and the Crispis, became members of the Greek revolutionary Philikiateria, the Society of Friends, originally which was formed in Romania. So the Jews, as a minority, were on the side of the Greek insurgents, as opposed to the 11 Jewish communities which were annihilated in the fighting. And also there were Jews taken as slaves and redeemed later in the slave markets of Izmir, or eventually were relocated or also liberated in Sidon in Lebanon. So these Crispy and Cohen families were great, powerful, and highly educated. A member of the Crispy family was Chrysotis' chieftain, who fought on the side of Theodoros Kolokotronis, who was the first president of Greece, and he was in charge of the insurrection. In 1840, when Evia was part of the Greek state, the first urban chart of the fortress was drawn. 455 real estate properties were listed, 51 belonged to the Jews. The Jewish community numbered 400 members, which was pretty high relatively. In 1894, the Jewish community had 52 families and 284 members, according to a document that the Jewish community sent to the American Jews asking for assistance. The reason for the appeal was the big destructive earthquake that almost demolished half the city. During that period, many Jews moved to other communities such as Volos, and the community was reduced to 170 members. In 1940, in the Greek-Italian War, one of the first Greek officers who fell heroically in battle was a Jew from Chalkis, Colonel Mordechai Frazis. In the war, Chalkis lost 22 of 327 members in fighting for the Greek army. And then in the Holocaust, most of the Jews were protected in the mountains by the leftist-leaning Elas E'am resistance, and the Metropolitan Gregorius, he helped hide the Torahs and other ornaments belonging to the synagogue, and he hid them in the Metropolitan Church. Here's a picture of the synagogue, which still exists today. It's a very small building, but it's a special building. The synagogue is on Kotsu Street. It's unknown when the first synagogue of Chalkis was erected. In 1854, during the Holy Week, a great fire destroyed the synagogue. In 1855, it was reconstructed in the same size with funds offered by the Duchess of Pleasance, Sophie de Marbois. She was a royalty who converted to Judaism and lived in Athens in the 1850s. Throughout the centuries, every time the synagogue was burned, a new one was immediately reconstructed on the same spot. However, in the 1854 fire, all the community's archives, library, and a large number of poetry manuscripts and a large number of invaluable relics and donations were destroyed. Only 3 scrolls were rescued due to superhuman efforts. The votive steels, those are plaques with sayings on it, are built into the walls of the synagogue, providing the most important data relating to it. You can see them today. I think one of them may even be 1,000 years old. The cemetery, this picture shows a unique structure. They look like little huts and caverns. You don't have that. I've seen things like that in Morocco, but I've never seen that anywhere else in Greece. Between 1990 and 2000, about 600 old graves underwent restoration and conservation works. Through the tombstones, most of which belonged to rabbis, one may discover that the community had been a spiritual center, justifying the name it was given, Little Safed, or Little Tzfat, a spiritual and Kabbalistic center in northern Israel. This title was also given to the communities such as Salonika or Patras. The tombstones of the Jewish cemetery also provide the presence of a large number of Sephardic Spanish Jews who settled in the community but did not assimilate into the Romaniote culture. However, they certainly contributed to the greatest possible extent to the spiritual and economic prosperity of the community. The cemetery includes a hall for funeral services, a washroom, and the guard's house, and an old building which was renovated and houses the findings of the cemetery like a museum. This was originally the guard's house. Its construction was sponsored by Ferdinand de Rothschild in 1897 when he visited Chalkis. In the fall of 1999, the ceremony for the placement of the mezuzah was held in the renovated building. There's a Holocaust memorial, and you see it here in 2 pictures. And these are pictures of Mordechai Frazis. So he was one of the architects of the pushback of the Italians attacked Greece on October 28, 1940, and Mussolini wanted the dictator of Greece, Metaxas, to capitulate, and Metaxas said no. In Greek, that's ochi. And then Greece fought back into Albania. It took them a while. Frazis, he was one of the architects of this counterattack, and leading his battalion on his white horse. He was killed on December 5th, 1940, leading his battalion and killed by Italian bombers. Now, he's commemorated throughout Greece today, also near where the battle was. But the problem was it took many years till Greek society would honor him as a Jew and would admit that a Jew merited being honored for his military contribution. In my film on the Jews of Yanina, I show that his statue was across the street from the Chief of Staff and Metaxas and the national heroes. But he was there, but because he was a Jew, they wouldn't put him on the same side of the street as the national heroes. So in Chalkis, which is his hometown, he's more commemorated. But it took many decades. It wasn't immediately. It wasn't in the 50s. And today, like Yosef Eliyahu, I talked about from Yanina as a writer, Frazis also as a Greek is revered. He started the Zionist movement in Chalkis, and he has other attributes. And with that, I'll finish this section.